Well, the massive Interstate 11 project is snaking its way through sections of Clark County that have known deposits of natural asbestos. The discovery of asbestos stopped the project in its tracks for nearly a year until managers could develop a program to protect their workers. But is the public also being protected from asbestos dust? George Knapp of the I-Team is here with an update on all that.
You know, Dave, as you might recall, state health officials were so concerned about the discovery of natural asbestos and what effect it might have, possibly derailing the bypass project, that they spiked the original study. They tried to stifle the scientists who found the evidence, then tried to discredit their research. But the agencies and companies in charge of the highway have left health officials in the dust. In a sense, they know the risk is real.
Is to monitor or to capture what an employee is breathing. So we'll take the air pump and we calibrate it.
Every day for the past year, portable air monitors like this one have been attached to the belts and collars of employees on the massive I-11 bypass project. 10 workers per day.
So then at the very end of this, I have a track.
The man in charge, Doug Lackey, is a construction guy, not a scientist, but he's embraced the role of asbestos manager because he knows what's at stake.
The more exposure you have, the greater potential you have for, disease down the road. And so what we're trying to do is everything we can to minimize anybody's exposure on the project or even people outside of the perimeter of our project.
His primary assignment is to protect employees from exposure to natural asbestos, but he's also a de facto public health officer. Every day, the air filters collected from employees are shipped by air to a lab in Arizona to determine levels of asbestos exposure. Also analyzed are filters plucked from a string of monitors positioned on the outer edges of the bypass project, installed to detect asbestos fibers that might be carried by the wind beyond the job site. State health officials have repeatedly assured the public that vast deposits of natural asbestos in the direct path of the highway represent, quote, no risk to public health. Those on the ground see it differently.
You don't want those fibers to become airborne. Your concern with asbestos is breathing it into the lungs. I mean, it acts like a little tiny dart that punctures the air sacs in the lungs. And those fibers are really small. They're measured in microns. You can't see them with the human eye.
The risks from natural asbestos were tragically demonstrated in the town of Libby, Montana, where long-term exposure to the deadly fibers killed more than 400 people and caused debilitating disease in thousands more. Workers carried the fibers home on their clothing and exposed family members who became sick. On the Beltway project, every employee undergoes asbestos training. Facilities were installed to clean asbestos off all vehicles, inside and out, right down to clothing.
And then boot washers, to knock everything off your boots.
Hey Rod, look right here.
These two UNLV geologists are largely responsible for the safety precautions on the Beltway project. Doctors Brenda Buck and Rod Metcalf discovered natural asbestos in southern Nevada 4 years ago, then predicted it would be found all along what became the path of the highway. State health officials were aghast and issued a cease and desist order to prevent the research from being made public. When the news finally broke, it caused the highway project to be delayed for a year. If not for Buck and Metcalf, hundreds of highway workers and their families would have been exposed, though it would take years before asbestos diseases struck. The two scientists are glad that OSHA standards are in effect to protect workers, but they note OSHA rules were not designed to protect the larger public.
It fits the letter of the law, but that the law does not mean that it's safe. So the workers who are out there, even if they're at the level of OSHA exposure, are still going to incur a significant risk of health, of disease, negative health outcomes.
I mean, even OSHA doesn't call those cutoffs safe. They call them permissive exposure levels.
Nevada has no laws or standards for natural asbestos, and since our state health officials think asbestos poses no risk, it isn't likely we're going to see any standards set anytime soon. OSHA safeguards are in place for the highway, but they don't apply to other pending development in the asbestos field. So how much asbestos is being detected? A hint, it's always worse on windy days. That part of the story tonight at 11. Plus, another source of asbestos in the wind, and it's even bigger than the bypass.